Okay. Chaim, everybody. So, Martha was sitting in her big, beautiful, fancy home. Might have been pronounced Marta, according to the Gemara, but just today we would pronounce it Martha. She was sitting in her big, beautiful home, and she calls in one of her servants, and she says, "I want you to go to the marketplace, and I want you to buy me some of the finest flour, soyless." And the servant, of course, rushes out to carry out her wishes, and he comes to the marketplace, and he looks around for fine flour, but he can't find any fine flour. You see, this story took place during at the beginning of the Roman siege of Yerushalayim. And there was a shortage of food. Everybody started buying up the food supplies once the city was under siege. And so Martha's servant is running around trying to find fine flour. But nobody has fine flour. It's like, we have regular flour? We don't have fine flour. You're like, no way, my boss would never. Martha is perhaps the wealthiest woman in the entire city, in the entire Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, she was able to pay off the king Yanai, to appoint her husband, Yeshua ben Gamla, as the high priest, as the Kohen Gadol. Right? The Gemara says she brought a big container, a tarka, half a se'ah, full of golden coins to King Yanai.
Was he meant to be the Kohen Gadol?
Well, it was a little bit corrupt in those days. Whoever paid the most money became a Kohen Gadol. So she would never want to have regular flour, so he rushes home, he comes, he tells Martha, there's no fine flour, we only have regular flour. So regular flour, not something I want to touch, but listen, I'm hungry, and there's no other choice. Okay, fine, you can go get some regular flour. The servant rushes back to the marketplace. I want to buy some regular flour. Sorry, regular flour is gone, it's all been bought out. We have coarse flour, very thick, coarse flour. And he's like, no way, my boss would never agree to have coarse flour, right? So the servant rushes back home, and he tells Martha, the regular flour is gone, there's only coarse flour now. And she's like, coarse flour? For me, it's like the peasants eat coarse flour. I expect me to eat coarse flour? And he's like, listen, there's nothing else. And she's like, okay, fine, you know what, we'll make an exception. You can go get coarse flour, make sure it's wheat flour. He runs back to the marketplace looking for coarse flour. Sorry, all the coarse flour is gone. There's barley flour if you want. Barley flour? It's for animals, right? The animals eat barley. And he rushes back home to Martha, and she's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I'm able to eat barley flour. Bread from barley? I don't know. But listen, I'm very hungry. You can go back to the marketplace. He runs back to the marketplace. By that time, all the flour is gone. Pretty much everything is gone. He comes back home to Martha, and he's like, listen, running out of everything. And she's like, okay, let me go check myself. She goes outside to look for food, and by the time she gets to the marketplace, there's no food to be had. She's walking around trying to find something to eat, when she notices, according to one version of the Gemara, some half-eaten figs on the floor. And she's hungry. She has nothing else to eat. She's going to eat. The wealthiest woman in Yerushalayim should eat half-eaten figs that somebody else sucked out the juice from this fig already. She picks it up. She eats it. Should she not? She's so hungry. She has no choice. She begins eating it. And she's so repulsed by it, she became very, very sick, and she passed away shortly afterwards.
Repulsed by what?
By the fact that she had to eat half-eaten figs that somebody else ate already, right? She was so disgusted by it that she died of disgust. The French writer and philosopher Voltaire, in his 1772 La Beguelle, I don't know how to pronounce this, writes, "Le mieux est l'ennemi de bien," which is translated as the perfect is the enemy of the good. And this was given a name by economist Harold Demsetz in 1969. He called this phenomenon the nirvana fallacy, which is when we take a look at something and we say it's not perfect, therefore we're not going to pursue it. Even though it might be good, it might be helpful, it might be useful, but it has these problems. It's not good enough. and we choose not to pursue it. And this is a problem that exists in our when a person will want to do something, and something comes up, an idea comes up, and we right away, it's not perfect, so let's push it away. And sometimes it's a big problem, right? Because if you push away the regular flour because you don't have fine flour, you might end up having nothing. So, in this week's Parsha, the Torah tells us the story at great length, the story of how Eliezer travels to find a wife for Yitzchak. And it tells us how he's praying to Hashem and how he's deciding and planning exactly how he's going to find the wife. And then, after he finishes his planning, he actually puts his plan in, he starts implementing it, and he goes and he meets the girl, and he finds Rivka. And the Torah repeats the entire story actually three times, right? First as he's planning, then actually does it, and then when he repeats what happened to Rivka's family. But if you look at the stories, at how stories are repeated, there are some minor differences between them. And we're going to discuss one of those differences now. This is a difference which is pointed out by the Or HaChaim. He writes that when Eliezer is preparing his planning, what he's going to do, so he's going to find a girl, he's going to approach her, and he's going to ask her to drink, to give him something to drink. So he says, I'm going to ask her, lower your pitcher and I will drink. But then, when he actually implements this plan, and he approaches Rivka, he doesn't say, lower your pitcher so I can drink. He says, let me sip a little bit of water from your jug. So the Or HaChaim asks, what's going on over here? Why did he switch why didn't he do what he planned to do? What? Why didn't he follow his plan? Why did he switch the words? Instead of asking for a drink, he asked for a little sip. I mean, why the change at the last minutes? So, the Baal Shem Tov was once sitting in his house, and there's a knock on the door, and they open the door, and these two men come in, and they want to speak to the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, so they come in, the first man introduces himself, I am the rabbi of this and this town, and this guy with me, his name is Zundel, and he's the gvir of the town, he's the wealthiest person in our city. And you see, we came here because I have a son. He's a big Torah scholar, very God-fearing, very pious. He's studying in yeshiva. And this Zundel over here, he has a daughter, and he wants to make a shidduch with my son. What do you think, Reb? You think it's a good shidduch? So the Baal Shem Tov says, well, is the girl modest and God-fearing and kind? He says, yeah, she's modest, God-fearing, and kind. So Baal Shem Tov says, okay, sounds like a good shidduch to me. So he says, yeah, but Zundel is not a Torah scholar. So the Baal Shem Tov says, well, does Zundel learn at all? Does he learn in the morning and at night like he's supposed to, according to halacha? And he says, yeah, he comes every morning and night to Torah class, but he's not a big scholar. So the Baal Shem Tov says, okay, that's fine. He doesn't, he works all day. He doesn't have an obligation to be a big scholar. He has an obligation to learn, and he's doing it. It sounds to me like it's a wonderful shidduch. And the Baal Shem Tov asked somebody to bring in a l'chaim and some mezainis. They say l'chaim together, l'chaim. They lift a handkerchief and they make a kinyan, and they say mazel tov. Right? The engagement is they're now engaged. Okay, the two people thank the Baal Shem Tov. They leave. And the Baal Shem Tov is sitting there, and a big smile appears at the Baal Shem Tov's face. He turns to one of his Hasidim, the rabbi of Skoli, and he says, the Olam Halitzonis is a very good shach. And the world of mockery, the world of jokes, is a very good matchmaker. Okay, waiting for some explanation, but the Baal Shem Tov doesn't offer any explanation. So the Chassid is a little bit curious. He runs out and chases down this rabbi, and he says, I had this, Baal Shem Tov made this strange comment about the world of mockery, the world of jokes. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about it. How did this shidduch come about? So he says, the world of Ritzonos. That's where I was. That explains it. No, what's the story? So he says, this Zundel, many years ago, he was a very, very poor man. And he was a water carrier. He used to go around, taking water from the well and delivering it to people's homes. And he used to go every morning to my house and deliver my water. And, as I'm the rabbi of the city, I treat everybody nicely, but I kind of look down at him. I couldn't, it's not something I wanted to do, but, maybe subconsciously, even, I don't know if it was even a conscious thing, but I kind of looked down at him. One day, I don't know, he bought the lottery ticket last week, and he got this $2 billion, right? And he's a rich man. He's now the wealthiest person in town. He's very kind. He's a nice guy. He gives tzedakah to everybody. And one day, the town matchmaker, the shadchan in the city, knocks on my door. He says that he has a good shidduch. He wants to make a shidduch between my son and Zundel's daughter. And my first thought was, Zundel, the water carrier? And I'm like, nah, it's not a good shidduch. Okay, the next day, I knock on the door from another matchmaker. Our town has 3 matchmakers. And he's like, we have a good shidduch over here. It's your son with Zundel's daughter. I'm like, no, somebody already suggested it's not. I don't think it's a good shidduch. Okay. The next morning, the 3rd matchmaker in town comes. He knocks on the door. No, good shidduch for you. So your son could marry Zundel's daughter. Not only that, I spoke to Zundel. Zundel's willing to give 3,000 rubles as a dowry, so your son can sit and learn. And he's also going to give 2,000 rubles to your yeshiva. And I say, listen, I got the shidduch twice already. It's not something I'm interested in. Stop bothering. The next morning, there's another knock on the door, and the first matchmaker came back. He's like, I spoke to you a couple of days ago. I was wondering if you reconsidered maybe. It's a really good shidduch. And of course, I realized that Zundel's paying all these matchmakers very, very well. And they're all trying to make the shidduch. And I said, stop bothering me. But every day they come back again and again. This went on for months, and this went on for a full year. And in my mind, I can't even imagine myself with Zundel, the water carrier. That's what I'm going to make a shidduch with, right? This is not the type of shidduch that I want. Anyways, about a week ago, I went to sleep at night and I had a very strange dream. In my dream, I'm sitting in a wagon, and we're traveling. Very often I travel around to the nearby towns to raise funds for my yeshivas. And we come to this strange town that I've never been to before, this little town. We come in, and we see a big shul at the main street of the town. So I go into the shul to meet people, to raise some money. And I come into shul, and I see there's a whole group of students sitting and learning, of Torah scholars sitting and learning Torah. And I approach, I want to hear what they're learning, and I see they're learning this very difficult Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef has a question on the tour, and they're discussing the question, and they're going back and forth. What's the tour's opinion? What's the Beis Yosef's opinion? So, I recently learned this Beis Yosef and this question on the tour, and I had a very good answer that I wanted to share with them. So I approached him and I said, I have a good way of answering the tour. I think we can remove the question of the Beis Yosef. And I started explaining to everybody how to learn the tour properly and how all the Beis Yosef's questions fall away. And I finished, and they're all staring at me. And as I finish, suddenly one of them starts laughing. And everyone starts laughing with him, and they're all laughing at me. One of them gets up and he's like, this fool, this ignoramus thinks he could answer the Beis Yosef's question? Who are you? And they all start laughing at me, and they're making jokes, and some of them start throwing things at me. It's never happened to me in my life, right? People disagreed with me, but to laugh at me like that, this never happened. I ran out of the shul, and I jumped back into my wagon. I said, we're getting out of this town. I don't know, never been in this town before. I don't know how this town suddenly appeared. I'm never coming back over here, and we headed out. And as we're leaving the town, suddenly a few miles away, I see another town. This is strange. Towns aren't usually this close to each other. We get to the next town, and as soon as we come in, we see another nice shul. So I head inside the second shul, and again, I see a whole group of Torah scholars sitting there and learning. And they're learning this very difficult question that the Raavad asks on the Rambam. And I listened, and I'd also recently learned this Rambam, so I got up and I said, I have a good answer for the Raavad's question. So they all look at me, and I start explaining the Rambam in a way that answers all the questions. And as I'm finished, this Amar, this ignoramus thinks that he can answer the Raivit's question. You think you understand? They're all laughing at me, and this time they're mocking me, and everyone's yelling at me and screaming at me and laughing at me. And again, I run out of the shul. 2 pounds. Wow. I run back to the wagon. We head out of the second town, and we arrive in a third town. Right? In the third town, I come in. And again, there's a nice shul over there, so I come in, and again, I see a whole group of people learning Torah, and they're discussing a very difficult question that Tosfos has on Rashi, right? And I recently learned this Tosfos. So I come and I'm listening, I could explain to you guys that for some reason he didn't learn his lesson after the first account. He's still going, right? He comes in, and he's like, listen, I have a good answer for Tosfos. This Rashi I could answer with a different Rashi somewhere else. He starts explaining, and I didn't even have a chance to finish my answer, and they start laughing at me and yelling at me. Who do you think you are? You think you can answer Tosfos' question? And I'm just standing there, I'm shocked. I can't believe what's happening. And suddenly one of the people stands up and he's like, guys, look, you know what's going on over here? This ignoramus, this fool over here, who thinks he understands Rashi better than Tosfos understands Rashi, he's so arrogant, he thinks he's so important, he's such a big Torah scholar, that in his town, there's a very kind and generous person, Zundel, who gives so much tzedakah, and he suggested, for the last year, he's been suggesting a match between his son and his daughter, and this arrogant ignoramus, for the last year, thinks that he's too good for Zundel. Zundel's not good enough for him, because he's such a big Torah scholar. And look at him, he can't even explain a simple Tosfos. And they're all laughing at me, and I run out again in embarrassment, and at that moment, I woke up. And I think to myself, maybe there's a message over here. And that's when I called Zundel. And I decided I'll discuss it with the Baal Shem Tov. And obviously, the Baal Shem Tov felt that this was a good match. And obviously, I needed a little. I needed a little wake-up call from the world of mockery to put me in my place a little bit. That I should, consider the shidduch. Now,
just moving, it's going to fly away.
when people are looking for shidduchim today, right? Today, people who have a problem. They look for segulas, different things that they could do to help with this problem, and people are looking for shidduchim. There are a lot of different segulas for shidduchim, but one of the most popular segulas for shidduchim, I guess it's not so popular in Miami, but in Israel it's very popular, and that is to go to a place in Israel called Amuka, and to daven at the gravesite of Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel. And a lot of people find their shidduchim after this, it's a very, very popular segula, and it works very well. And however, it's a little bit strange because we don't really have a very good source for this segula. And there's no real reason that's given for the segula, right? What is the connection between Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel? He was a student of Hillel, and there doesn't seem to be any open connection between him and shidduchim. And there are many different opinions how this segula came about, and what's the reason behind it. There are some people who say it's based on a misunderstanding of Rashi, which is a little hard to say because segulas don't start because of misunderstandings. At least it shouldn't. And even if so, Rashi there's no reason behind it still. It will explain how it started, but it wouldn't explain the logic behind it. There are those who say that Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel speaks about the importance of shidduchim, and therefore perhaps there might be a segula to daven at his gravesite, but there are a lot of svarim that speak about the importance of shidduchim. This doesn't seem to be particularly relevant. There are others who give another reason. They say that Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel himself had difficulty finding a shidduch, or perhaps difficulty having children, and therefore going to his gravesite might help with this. But again, there's no source for any of this. So there's one very interesting explanation that's given. Some people, I heard this in the name of Menachem, the Ger Rebbe. He says like this: the Gemara tells us about Hillel's yeshiva, right? Hillel had in his yeshiva 80 students. 80 students in his yeshiva. The Gemara tells us out of these 80 students, this is in Sukkah Chaf Ches Amud Aleph, 30 of the students were worthy of having the Shekhinah rest upon them like it rested on Moshe Rabbeinu. Another 30 students were worthy of they were able to stop the sun in the middle of the sky, just like Yeshua did. And the last 20 students, they were Beinonim, they were average students, which in Chassidus we explained that Beinonim has a little bit of a deeper meaning, right? Now, the smallest of these students, the lowest of the students, was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Who was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew every single verse in the Torah, every single law in the Mishnah, every single Talmudic discussion, hundreds of years before the Talmud was ever written down, every Aggadic teaching. He knew the secrets of the creation of the world. He knew the Maisim, or the secrets of Hashem's chariot. He knew how to calculate the seasons and the astronomy. He knew the astronomy necessary to calculate the seasons. He knew the language of the angels, the language of the demons, the language of palm trees. Rashi writes, I don't know what this means. What the Gemara says, that's that he somehow knew Sichas Tekalim, the language of the palm trees, and he knew all the parables of foxes.
Now I don't want to know.
The Gemara continues, if this is true about the lowest of the students, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, can you imagine how great the greatest of the students was? Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, the greatest of the students. He was so holy that when he would learn Torah, a fire would surround. He would be surrounded by a heavenly fire, and birds that were flying overhead would be consumed, would be burnt up with this fire. Any bird that was flying over his head would be burnt up.
Could anything else be
What? So this is what some people, I heard it attributed to the Ger Rebbe, explain is what the reason behind this segula. The segula for shidduchim. What is the biggest problem in shidduchim? The biggest problem, why can't people find the shidduch? Because, what?
The shidduch crisis.
Why is there a shidduch crisis? What's the problem behind the shidduch crisis? The problem is, if you come to anybody who's looking for a shidduch, and you ask them what they're looking for, they're going to give you a very long list, a big shopping list, full of things that they're looking for. And they have in their mind a picture of exactly what they want in a shidduch. They have this fantasy that they've been dreaming about for many years, and they're building up this fantasy in their minds of what their shidduch is supposed to look like, what their bride or their groom is supposed to look like, is supposed to act like. And what happens is, when reality hits, and when they actually meet their shidduch, there's usually a big discrepancy between the person that they meet and the fantasy that they have in their minds. Right? That's just how reality works. Right? And they've been building up this fantasy for many, many years. Right? They have this picture, exactly what they're looking for. All these items, they have to check off every single one. And they might check off 99 of the items, but there's one item that this person doesn't check off. Nope, it's not good enough. Right? He's a good, kind person, but he used to be a water carrier. Right? It's not for me. And unfortunately, the perfect is sometimes the enemy of the good. Now, in Hebrew, and actually in Yiddish, but it's also used in Hebrew, the way to describe somebody who has a strange fantasy in their minds is hat fegelach kap. And in Hebrew also it's used a little bit. Siforim barosh, he has birds in his head. So, how do you actually solve the shidduch problem? You have to get rid of these birds in his head. You have to burn up the fantasy that he has. And that's Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, who burnt up all the birds around his head. He's the biggest solution to the shidduch crisis. Right? So this explains the Orach Chaim, is what was going on with Eliezer. Eliezer comes to the well, and he closes his eyes, and he starts davening Hashem. And he starts making a big, complicated plan. He has this perfect fantasy, exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to say this to the girl, she's going to do this, and I'm going to say this, and he's going to do this. He has the whole thing planned out. Everything. Right? And it's actually a good thing. We're supposed to have a picture in our mind of what we're looking for. A person who doesn't know what they're looking for, that's even bigger. That's the second problem in shidduchim. People who don't know perhaps that's even a more common problem in shidduchim. People don't know what they're looking for, right? So it's a good thing. Eliezer had a picture in his mind exactly what Yitzchak's wife should look like and act like and do. But now he's coming to the well, And he sees this girl coming out towards the well, and he sees how kind she is to everybody around her. According to some people, there was a miracle that happened. The water rose up to greet her. And he approaches her. And he's like, now I'm going to check if this girl is going to fit my shopping list. But there's a big problem. What happens if she does not match my shopping list of items that I'm looking for? What happens if she does not, if I put her next to my fantasy girl, and there's some differences between them? So Eliezer says, you know what? That could be a big problem. And therefore, I'm going to make sure, as I'm coming to meet this girl, I'm going to change my plans a little bit. Because I have to recognize that even if this girl doesn't fit my fantasy exactly, every last detail, I have to realize that I'm in reality and that she's a good girl, a kind girl, and she'll make a good wife for Yitzchak. And that's why he has this perfect plan. He's going to up to the girl, he's going to ask her to give him a big drink. And he comes to her, he's like, maybe give me a little sip. Right? She won't give me a big drink, she'll give me a smaller drink. That's also fine. Right? He recognized that the shidduch might not fit what was going on in his mind before, and he was still okay with it. And this really is something we have to realize in our own lives. Of course, it's very relevant to anybody who's looking for a shidduch. But even after you get married, we still have the same problem, right? We have a picture in our mind of what our wife should do, what she should act like, how she should treat us, how she should run the house. And sometimes the reality doesn't match our fantasy.
You think sometimes it happens?
Some parts of it happen, some parts don't. Right? And sometimes it doesn't match. And we have to realize that the perfect is sometimes the enemy of the good. We have to recognize that if it's good, it's good. Right? We shouldn't allow perfect to get rid of the good. And this is not only true with our spouses, this is true in every relationship that we have. Right? This is true with our children. Right? One of the biggest problems between parents and children today is that the parent will have a picture in their mind what they want their children to grow up as. Right? I have a picture in my mind what my son will be, exactly what he's going to do, exactly what he's going to learn, exactly how he's going to act. And you know what? My son doesn't match that picture. Right? Sometimes not even close to that picture that I have.
My son?
Right? And the question is, how do I respond to that? Do I get all angry and try to squeeze him into this mold that I made for him? Or do I say, okay, I have a picture and it turns out a little bit, I have this fantasy and it doesn't match my fantasy. Right? And a lot of people have a hard time accepting this. And this is a cause for a lot of friction between children and parents. And unfortunately, today also works the other way. Some children have a fantasy of what their parents should do, and their parents don't always match up to that. And this is true with our relationship with our friends. And we have to realize that perfect is sometimes the enemy of the good. And we have to sometimes burn up those birds flying around our heads. And just to conclude with the final story, in about 250 years ago, in the town of Buchach, there lived a very, very wealthy man, Chaim, and his daughter reached the age of marriage, and Chaim was looking for a shidduch for his daughter. So he goes to the yeshiva, and he says to the yeshiva, I have a lot of money, I want to support a big Torah scholar who can sit and learn all day. And the yeshiva says, we have this amazing bacher, this brilliant Torah scholar, very nice person, good midas. His name is Moshe Meshulam Igra. And he was, at the age of 9, he gave a big pilpul in the yeshiva in Brody and Brod, and the Torah scholars there were blown away. He's a brilliant scholar, he's a rising star. He's still young, I think he was about 12 or 13 at the time, but he'd make a great match for your daughter. Okay, sounds great, right? He speaks to Meshulam Igra, he goes home, he tells his daughter about it, they're very excited, but his daughter, is a little bit hesitant. She says, this Meshulam is not from comes from a very poor family, and we are a very wealthy family. We're friends with all the high society and the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. We have lots of very wealthy friends. We go to fancy dinners all the time. I don't know how this Meshulam will fit in at these parties, right? How we'll be able to interact with my wealthy friends. He might stand out a little bit. So, let's invite him before the wedding. We'll invite him to a big fancy dinner. Okay, so they invite Meshulam to come to this big fancy dinner at Chaim's house, and before Meshulam goes, he knows he's never been at a fancy dinner before, so he takes classes, right? He takes classes you can take in etiquette, right? His friends tell him you gotta, you come in, you gotta take the napkin, put it down on your lap, pick up a fork and a spoon, don't touch the food with your hands, eat slow, right? They give him all the lessons. He's ready, right? He comes to the big party, and they sit him up at the head table, and they bring out the food, and he knows exactly what to do. He puts the napkin down, he takes the fork, he knows which fork, there are 2 forks, he knows which one to take for what, and he has everything figured out, and everything's going well, the meal goes very smoothly, everything's delicious, until it comes the end of the meal. At the end of the meal, they take away the food, and they bring out something very special. Something, a new fad at that time. It was a very new concept. Most people weren't even familiar with it. Anybody knows what coffee is? Right, coffee? So, 250 years ago, coffee had just been brought over from America, and it was very popular at all the fancy parties, and they bring in coffee. Now, they didn't just bring him a cup of coffee, they brought out a beautiful silver platter, and they put it in front of him, and he looks down, he's never seen this before in his life, he looks down at the silver platter, he sees a cup with this brown liquid in it, and then there's another cup over there with some white liquid, looks like milk, and then there's this little bowl with sugar, and right on the side there's this beautiful little silver spoon that he's supposed to mix everything together with. Now, he has no idea what he's supposed to do over here. And he's looking around, and everyone's just looking at him, right? Because he's at the head table. And he's like, there's this dark liquid, this white liquid, and this food, this sugar over here. What am I supposed to eat first? So, so he remembers learning that when you, in general, unless you're thirsty, when you have a meal, you're first supposed to eat, and then you're supposed to drink. That's what the Talmud is brought down in halacha. So he takes a little bowl of sugar, he takes a spoon, and he starts eating. Right? He makes a bracha, he starts eating, and it's a little bit strange. He's never eaten a bowl of sugar before, but he doesn't want to say anything. His father-in-law is serving this, so he's not going to say anything. So he finishes the bowl of sugar. Everyone's staring at him. Now he has these 2 cups, this brown liquid and a white liquid. What should he have next? So he remembers, the Gemara says that when Hashem created the world, he started off with darkness, and then he went to light, right? That's why in Yiddishkeit, the night comes before the day. So if he has this dark liquid and the white liquid, he's going to start with the dark liquid. So he picks up the cup of coffee, starts drinking it, and he's a little bit surprised. It's very bitter, and there's no sugar or milk inside, so it's, very strong, bitter coffee. And a little surprised they would serve this to him, but he doesn't want to say anything, right? He's polite. He slowly drinks down his coffee, and as he gets to the bottom of the cup, he looks down and he sees there's like black powder on the bottom, right? The coffee grinds are there. And this is strange. I've never drank. I found food on the bottom of my cup, but okay, this is a new experience for me. So he finishes the coffee, puts down the cup, he takes out the spoon, and he sticks it in, he takes out the coffee grinds, he puts it into his mouth, he starts chewing it, and it's very gritty, almost like sand, very bitter. It's disgusting, but he doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't want to, embarrass his future father-in-law. So he slowly, chews it. It's very difficult for him, but he's chewing it. He gets it down, he takes another spoon, and slowly he chews. Everybody's staring at him. He doesn't know what everybody's looking at. Right? What's so strange, And he slowly finishes up all the coffee grinds, and then he washes it down with a cup of milk, right? And then he turns to his father and is like, "This is interesting. I've never had this before. Thank you very much. It's a new experience for me." And then he looks over at his future wife, and her face is turning different colors, and she does not look happy, right? She runs over to her father afterwards. Absolutely not. I am not marrying this guy. He made such a fool out of us. He embarrassed. Doesn't know how to drink coffee, right? That's it. The shidduch is off. Her father's like, "Listen, I used to. You could learn." She's like, "Absolutely not." So, he tells him, "Sorry, the shidduch is off." Okay, fine. Goes back to yeshiva, I guess he got married, so he found somebody else to marry. But a year later, Chaim is traveling, and he comes to the city of Breslov. The father-in-law, or the girl's father, and he comes to the city of Breslov, and he goes in to see the big rabbi, Rabbi Yeshaya Pick, that you wrote a commentary on the Parshas Hashas. He was a very well-known and respected rabbi. So Chaim goes in to see him. And he comes in, and he sees Rabbi Yeshaya holding this letter. And he's reading the letter. His face is shining. He's like, wow, brilliant! Genius! Wow, never seen something so... Wow. His face is shining, he finishes the letter, and he turns to Chaim and he says, you know this amazing letter I got? This is brilliant young man, I've never met somebody this knowledgeable and learned. Maybe you know him, he's from your area, he's from Buchach. His name is Meshulam Igra. Chaim doesn't say a word, he collapses to the ground and faints. Right? So everybody comes running, they bring some water, they pour water on him, and everything okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. Well, why did you faint? He says, well, this Meshulam Igra was supposed to be my son-in-law, but we broke off the shidduch at the last minute. You broke off? Why did you break off the shidduch? Well, he didn't know how to drink coffee. Chayei looks at him, he's like, you broke off such a shidduch because he couldn't drink coffee. That explains why you fainted. If I were you, he said, I would faint again. Right? So, we all need to realize that we all have in our mind a picture of what we want our spouse to look like, how we want our spouse to act, how we want our children to look, how we want our friends to look, and how we want our parents to act towards us, and how we want all of our relationships to be. And you know what? Some of the things that we want are indeed very important, and some of them are complete foolishness, right? They have to know how to drink coffee, might not be such an important thing. But even the important things, you have to realize that no one is going to match, no one in the real world is going to match our fantasy that we have in our mind, this picture that we built up in our mind over the years. And we have to realize that the perfect is sometimes the enemy of the good. And we have to realize that we have to look at other people and see all the qualities that they have. And even if they don't match the perfect image that we have in our mind, we have to take all those fegelach and kop, all those birds that we have flying around our head, and destroy them, burn them up, and look at all the good qualities that our partners have. Chaim, Chaim, Chaim.